Hello, you lovely lot. How you doing? Welcome to Martine Talks. So, I'd been getting some messages, really lovely messages, and one of them had said, you know, they wanted to praise me for the courage it takes for me to share my stuff. And yeah, it does take courage, and it is brave, although I don't recognise it as that now, and that's only because the courage and bravery came initially in my recovery when it was kind of do or die. To get recovery, it meant being honest and open and getting fucking vulnerable and painful stuff, but fucking worth it. And that's kind of inspired this video in talking about vulnerability and how it's a superpower. It certainly turned my life around. It was necessary for my recovery. So in that sense, it's not that I didn't choose to get vulnerable and kind of share my stuff. It was necessary. And I understood that from the beginning. And it's very frightening, very scary, but it needed to be done. And so as time goes on, because I share my stuff and I've kind of lit a light on all that stuff, so it's not so dark and it's not, you know, my secret, my dirty secrets anymore. And so that lifts me, and it lifts me from the shame. It kind of helps me to grow and to feel good about who I am and hold my head up high and show up. Right, so show up in a different way that I'm feeling more worthy, and this does link into vulnerability. And the first thing I'll say is how I'm inspired and have learned a lot about this is a YouTube video. Well, it was a TED Talk back in 2010. Brené Brown. A lot of you may have seen it because it went viral. I think it's got 21 million views to date. That's no accident. She's a researcher, American professor and researcher, and she did in the area of vulnerability and shame and stuff. And vulnerability, to me, you know, we all try and avoid vulnerability for obvious reasons, right? The word vulnerable. But we need to get vulnerable. It's really important that we get vulnerable, because otherwise we're pretending, we're not being who we are hiding that stuff. And when we hide that stuff and keep it dark, it is our dirty little secret, and we have shame. And shame is very potent for negativity, low energy vibes, depression, anxiety, etc. So we need to kind of shine a light on that, but we avoid it naturally, because as we grow up, of course, we experience life, and life is messy, and you know, we get let down, we experience betrayal, experience failure, we're rejected, all that stuff. You know, life is about being vulnerable, right? Life is vulnerable, and so we start to put our guards up, but the higher they go, the less we connect with others. And it's in our DNA to connect with others. You know, our ancestors, you know, I always talk about this, but it's good to look back because it can give us, you know, a lot of insight. But we were nomads, yet traveling, living in the wild. And so it was in our DNA to connect with others. We had to live in tribes if we wouldn't survive solo. So it's in our DNA to connect with others and obviously procreate as well. That's another story. So when we're talking about vulnerability, that's about connection, and the fear that we have around getting vulnerable is because we fear being rejected and therefore being disconnected, and rightly so. And the way we avoid it is obviously addiction, and that links in a big way for me. If we talk about addiction, when Brené talks about the people that she studied, because she did years of research. I'll put the link in the description box because you can have a look at it. But the research that she'd done, she found that there was kind of two camps of people, two categories. And in one, they were the wholehearted people that she said that that knew they were worthy. They understood that they were worthy despite all the things that we go through in life. So, you know, at their core. And then there was the other camp that obviously did not feel worthy. And I believe I'm in the camp that did not feel worthy for whatever reason. And that's when I talk about addiction, that emptiness, right? That hole, that gaping hole that we're trying to fill. We're trying to fill that void. Because if we talk about the people that were wholehearted, if rejection, failure, betrayal, you know, being lied to, let down, that kind of hits the surface and it hurts, and it can hurt really bad. But at the core, they know the message is that they're worthy, okay? And so when she talks about vulnerability, she talks about some people experience it as excruciating vulnerability. And the others, and she says the wholehearted ones, describe it as not comfortable, of course, but not excruciating. And then let's talk about the addict. For me, I understand it as excruciating because at my core, I didn't know that I was worthy. So when I'm lied to or betrayed, or I had experienced failure or success, it hits so much deeper because I haven't got that message deep down in my core saying that I'm worthy. So if I'm lied to, or if I'm not loved, then I'm not lovable. You know, if someone rejects me, I'm not lovable. Whereas the person who's wholehearted will say, that person doesn't love me and it hurts me and I have heartbreak, but I know I'm lovable. So these messages really hit deep. And trust, you know, if you kind of trust is broken, then I'm not someone that can receive trust. I'm not worthy of it. Someone that will be loyal to me. You know, I kind of, that message will sink deep and say, well, I'm not worthy of that. And I can see it as an inner armor, if you like. When someone who's wholehearted experiences those things in life that knock us, they have this inner armor that will kind of sustain them through that. But then if you don't have that message deep down that you're worthy and you're lovable, etc., then it penetrates because you've got no armor there. And so it brings you down and it affects everything. It becomes part of your identity. Instead of saying, well, I can move on from this. And even though we do, the pain is, I think, a little deeper. That's how I see it and I experience it. That's where addiction, where I talk about the hole in the soul kind of thing in the psyche. Can we build that? You know, if we're not wholehearted, the question is, can we build on that and can we grow and start to feel worthy? Absolutely, of course we can. And that's where I think the recovery, the work I did on myself and shining light on that stuff, where I thought, if I share this, you're not going to like me, you're not going to want to be around me, I'm not worthy, right? And then you start to share it and people still want to be around you and still like you and love you, and you go, oh, well done, I might be all right, you know. I'm okay, you know. But we have to see the evidence of that if I share who I am to you, that, you know, you'll still love me. And so it takes time. And others that might have this wholeheartedness anyway, they've kind of got that in the tank anyway. And someone like me, I have to build on that, and I have to continually build on that. So it's not like I do some work on it for a few years and then I can kind of let go and it's there. It's not. It's continual work for me. And so I have, even though I can share about my stuff now and I can hold my head up high and the shame has lifted, I still have a lot of shame in other areas in my life, and it's hard for me to get vulnerable, like specifically in the area of love, etc. And I think we all struggle with that. It's the human condition, right? You know, and so what is getting vulnerable? What does that look like? Well, it is saying I love you to someone where you don't know if they're going to return that, if they're going to reject you. It's asking someone out and they might reject you. It's failing, you know, and it's failing hard, and people seeing that. It's making mistakes and admitting mistakes. It's saying I'm sorry when you don't want to, or you feel shame about that. It's being wrong, you know. Got to work on that one. wanting to be right all the time. And and Burney talks about, it's not just addiction. We avoid it also with perfectionism. That can be like an addiction. It's like, I need to cover everything up. Everything needs to look great. My world, my home needs to look great. I need to have everything in order, because that will reflect on me, because underneath that you're feeling you're not worthy. So everything around needs to be perfect, because if that's not perfect, it will cut deep. It will say, well, then that's my identity. Everything's not perfect. I'm not perfect. Therefore, I'm not worthy. And blaming others, shifting that responsibility on other people, because if it's not my responsibility, I haven't got to feel that stuff. It's black and white thinking, so there's no grey areas. So I'm right, you're wrong, no in between. There's lots of ways that we avoid kind of getting vulnerable. But vulnerability is so powerful. Like I say, it turned my world around. If I didn't get vulnerable, I wouldn't be sober today. I'd be still living where I was, and I'd still be feeling like a piece of shit, because my behaviour and the rejection I got from it, and how I was living, would then impact on who I am. And of course it's not who I am, but it feels that way. So, there, and I love it in others. It's so attractive, vulnerability. And I don't mean sexually, physically, or anything like that, or romantically. I mean those people that can get vulnerable. You just want to be around them. They inspire you, they encourage you. It kind of gives you permission to be imperfect yourself, and the humour around it. And it's so refreshing. And that's what I love about people in recovery. They're very brave and courageous. And, I want to talk about a friend of mine who's loved him dearly. We lost him quite a few years ago now. And he'd got, I think I'll have to ask one of my other friends, nearly 25 years clean and sober. And I bloody loved him. He was such a good friend of mine, but what was so attractive about him, and I mean, again, it's not sexually or romantically, but just want to be around him. He was from London, bit of a geezer. He wouldn't like me saying that. Had a bit of swagger. I don't think he'd like that either. But and he dabbled in business. He was quite successful in a lot of areas, but he'd done a lot of work, and he'd done inner child work. If you don't know about inner child work, I'll put a link in the description, but it's fantastic stuff. I've done some work on that. But he'd done a lot of work on that, and he understood it, and he would share in a meeting about, in a nutshell, it's, if you don't deal with your childhood trauma and that stuff, then it kind of carries on with you, and it will come out, and those childhood-like behaviours will come out in adulthood. And he used to talk about, he'd have his little boy, so him as a child, but also his teenager, and he'd say that his teenager would act up, particularly around relationships and stuff, and he'd get really raw about it, but there was a lot of humour around it. But to see this guy who's really cool, and he used to play in bands and that, and his friends were kind of all cool, but they were kind of still using. And I remember he'd say, like, it was quite funny that when he'd got recovery, they'd say he's lost it. He's got. He was walking around preaching, and kind of, he had a big book with him, and that's a recovery book, and they'd also, but they followed him later on. But he got it, and he'd share in meetings, and I used to love it, and he'd inspire not just me but other people, and give you permission to go, you know what, it's pretty cool to get vulnerable, to share your stuff and to understand it. A really good friend, and a really big loss. But that's the point, is that, unless you get, that's why I think I'm lucky as well, that when you're around people like that, people that are really kind of gritty and raw, but they don't take themselves too seriously, and they're okay with being seen, really seen. There's nothing like it. And I know without the recovery rooms, I wouldn't have seen people to that depth sharing, because it's not normal, is it, to kind of share your really deep stuff in normal society. It should be, of course, but yeah, so, and that's why it's a superpower, because not only does it bring you connection? Because when we see others getting raw and getting real and be seen, we can connect with them. One, it gives us permission to kind of bring those barriers down ourselves, that it's okay. But for ourselves, when we're sharing, is that we're shining a light on that stuff, and that we're still loved and respected. In fact, we're respected where we might not have been before. And it just brings and breeds connection. And we need connection for society, like I said, for survival, And I've got a lot of work to do, because I do have barriers up, because I'm still frightened in many areas, still got that fear going on. But what I understand today is that what I need to do is bring those barriers down, and I do it as often as I can, and I'm working on that stuff. But it's a superpower, because if you kind of start to get vulnerable and you show all your the real you allow yourself to be seen and to be heard for who you really are. The message you're sending yourself is that I'm worthy, and I'm okay as I am. Life, you just take a deep breath. It's like you've taken a nice deep breath, and you're kind of going, it's okay to be me. And so if you want more of that stuff, right? So if you want to be more successful, have more love, be more attractive, experience more joy, compassion, and be out the ability to be more gentle and kinder to yourself, then it's about getting vulnerable, to build that sense of belonging and that wholeheartedness, that we talked about. It's about getting vulnerable and shining a light on that shame and that fear, and getting stronger, building your character. And it, for your kids, it's such a good kind of being a good role model for your kids, to show them it's okay not to be perfect. And that's the point, because while we're always striving to be perfect, people can get mixed up with self-growth and self-development about getting perfect. Fuck that. We're a game of soldiers. It's not about being perfect. It's about being the best that I can be, and fucking up on the way, and failing a lot of the time, but working on that and being okay, with not getting it right and not being the best of the best, and that's a work in progress. I think we're always kind of work on that. I know I will. And the more acceptance I have about me not being perfect and being imperfect, the better it is. But I still try every day to do my best. And that's what makes me feel proud, And like I say, hold my head up high, sleep at night, put one foot in front of the other, and have a bit more acceptance about who I am. So if you want to embark on this journey of getting more vulnerable, so you can have all that lovely stuff, and start to be authentic, be real, be seen, connect with others, and have that sense of worthiness that helps you sleep at night, helps you get up in the morning, and have that kind of bring meaning and purpose to your life, right? Or the ability to find that purpose and meaning, because connection is pretty much what they say is what is our purpose and meaning in life. Because that's the only real stuff that we leave this earth with, right? All the material stuff is irrelevant. It's nice, but it's irrelevant when it comes down to it. It's about saying I love you first, not having any guarantees that that's going to be said back to you. It's about saying I'm sorry, irrelevant of what that other person is how they're going to react, if they're going to accept your apology or not. Being real about that. About admitting when you're wrong, those mistakes that you make, shedding a light on that. That part of us that it's never enough. We feel we're not enough. We're not rich enough. We're not skinny enough. We're not pretty enough. We're not clever enough. We're not funny enough. All that shit, and that can hold us back in so many ways. And of course we're good enough as we are, and that doesn't mean we can't work on ourselves. Of course it does. But generally that desire in us to be better is what's important. And then we put it into action, and we might be scared. Of course we're scared. you know, that what I explained is like, courage is not the absence of fear, it's the fact that we're scared but we do it anyway. That's what courage is. And I've experienced that many times, and I'm proud to say that the more I realise that being scared shouldn't stop me. In fact, it should have the opposite effect, that to motivate me to go, I'm scared for a reason here, you know. And I don't mean that kind of fear that's keeping me safe. I mean the fear of opening up and being seen. And so, yeah, if you want more acceptance of yourself, you want more to feel whole again and to connect with others and to feel that sense of peace, and to fill that void, it's about getting vulnerable. And I really want to encourage you to watch the TED Talk, because it's fantastic. And if you're going to start being vulnerable, then easy does it. And I wish you well on that. It is a superpower, that's for fucking sure. All right, thanks for listening, guys. I hope to see you in the next video. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe. It's free.